Funding for this video is brought to you in part by Book of the Month and from viewers like you. Thank you. What's up, punks? And welcome to video. If by any chance you're fresh meat, hello and welcome. My name is Allie. Around these parts we balance daily life alongside disability, celebrate mundanity, and read a whole lot of books. I have read all 2 comments that say that they hate the microphone. Right behind this wall is the mechanism for the elevator of this entire building, and every time anyone uses it, it gets so loud in here, it drives me bananas. I messed with the settings, I watched a couple tutorials, I put this little thing on the top of it. I hear you, I see you, I'm working on it. So stick with me if you can, thank you for your patience. Okay. Anyway, what you're tuned into right now is my June reading review. I read a total of 16 things, which is objectively bountiful. I did plan on reading a book a day in June, but alas, health got in the way, my body got in the way, my brain got in the way. So I adjusted my expectations and I made do. But before we dive deep into those reading reviews, let's hear it from today's sponsor, who is none other than the beloved Book of the Month. Now, if you're unfamiliar with a super fun bookish subscription service, let me fill you in. Because with each month that you're signed up with Book of the Month, you have access to choose from their carefully selected new releases alongside their unbeatable price for freshly published hardcover fiction. And I mean unbeatable, baby, because you can get your first book from Book of the Month for just $9.99 using the code AllisonPages. But my personal favorite part is that it is risk-free to join with their skip policy, because for any reason at all, you can push pause on a month without being questioned, without being charged, without being penalized. And in my humble opinion, July is a seriously exciting month to join, so let's talk books. The first book I chose was The Connellys of County Down by Tracy Lang, which is a contemporary fiction that takes place in Ireland. We follow a protagonist who is recently released from prison and is restarting her entire life at the age of 30. I love stories that dissect themes surrounding families and generational trauma, so of course I added her to my cart. And the add-on that I chose was the new Riley Sager book. It's called The Only One Left, and it's a mystery thriller that follows a caretaker who picks up a new job in this spooky house with a spooky lady who is infamous for murdering her family. But did she murder her family? Dun dun dun! So if you would like to join in on all of this fun and excitement, you can click the link in the description box below and get your first book from Book of the Month for just $9.99 using the code AllisonPages. Thank you so much for sponsoring today's video, Book of the Month. I love working with y'all. Let us transfer from what is to be read to what has been read. But first, our 3 quick disclaimers. 1, don't compare yourself to anyone ever, especially people on the internet.com who read books for a living. As long as you're reading, you're winning. The second one, if I loved a book that you hated or hated a book that you loved, that is not a personal attack. We all look for different things when it comes to ink on paper, and that is celebrated in this house. And 3, please make sure to check any and all content warnings. If you have any sensitivities, there's no shame in that. Take care of yourself. Okay, 16 books read in June. Let's do this. It is kind of roughly in a sort of order from least favorite to middle range to top tier books. My least favorite book of last month was Winter by Allie Smith. Now, this is the second installment in Allie Smith's Seasonal Quartet, which is a collection of slow character studies. Each one takes place in a different season. It starts with autumn, and I read autumn last fall, and I loved it so much. So I was super excited to pick up winter. I did intend to read this one in the winter, but she got too sad in the winter time, and she didn't read winter in the winter time. She is me. But I'm trying to catch up now, and so I read it. Now, within these pages, we follow a band of characters, and that's honestly really all I can tell you despite my extensive note-taking, because this book was painfully forgettable to me, and I didn't really like it. Now, it did have Allie Smith's poetic writing style, which I love, aside from the lack of quotation marks, that is. But with this one, I just couldn't connect to the characters at all to save my life. Between all the time jumping and the bounty of people we're bouncing between, I was never not confused. And now I'm so bummed because I have no motivation to continue reading this quartet, because this one put me in a reading slump. I wanted to DNF it several times, but I didn't because I have all 4 books and I loved autumn so much, so I'm just very discombobulated on how to feel here. So if you loved spring or summer, please let me know, because I need some motivation after this one. Up next, we have Bitter by Kweke Emeze. This is a prequel to one of Emeze's other books, Pet, which I read in 2020 and thoroughly enjoyed. Within this one, we are in the same dystopic space, and we follow a group of teenagers who are enrolled in this experimental, otherworldly kind of art school. Within it, this giant revolution is unfolding, and we are faced with some seriously profound conversations surrounding the heavy responsibility that older generations are placing on younger generations. My favorite theme was all of the questioning of what one's role is in all of this destruction slash rebuilding slash revolution. Where are we needed? Where do we belong? How can we help? Can we even help? Is it too late? It was very exciting to see these themes explored in a book that is intended for younger audiences. But for me personally, I just needed a whole lot more from this one. I found the pacing to be pretty clunky and the ending ultimately unsatisfying. However, the meat and the potatoes of this book, what is to be learned and talked about, was quite good. Next, The Seas by Samantha Hunt. This is a literary fiction that follows a 19-year-old girl who is completely convinced that she is in fact a mermaid. She also happens to be in love with a man who is significantly older than her. I had seriously high hopes for this one. I read it in my 5-star predictions reading vlog, but it fell pretty flat for me. First of all, it's mentioned that nearly everyone in this waterfront town happens to be deaf deaf, but it's not explored why that is, and this disability is not given any nuance or understanding or humanization. It's just thrown in there kind of to, I assume, be like, ooh, look how interesting this town is, which rubbed me the wrong way. I also just felt like there was so much lost potential with this. I think it could have said so much about mental health, so much about grief, how do we stayed with the protagonist. The entire time I felt like I was where I didn't need to be in the story. Like, while I'm learning about this thing, all this other stuff is happening, and this is where I need to be, but this is where I'm stuck. Does that make sense? It did have some lovely lines in there. The cover is absolutely stunning, but I was pretty disappointed here. Like, it was good enough, it was fine, but I expected it to blow me out of the water. Boom. Next, Mooncakes by a whole lot of folks. This was the first book that I read in our great gay reading vlog. It was the graphic novel that I selected for said video. I had so much fun reading Queer Lit with y'all. Anyway, this is a very cozy graphic novel that follows two friends who reunite in order to get to the bottom of this demon horse ghost thing in the forest. It's got gay grandmas, it's got mushroom slugs, it's got curses, it's got it all. It was a little predictable and pretty simple, but overall, it was just such a cute little time. I loved the color palette. There's really no complaints from me. It was good. Next, The Collected Regrets of Clover by Nikki Brommer. This is a story that follows a death doula in New York City who spends her days playing mahjong with her elderly neighbor, frequenting death cafes in order to discuss mortality, and living vicariously through her neighbors as she struggles deeply to connect with those around her and her own life. With this one, I think it could have shined even brighter had it been a novella. There were times when this book almost slowed down to a complete halt. However, this is the kind of book that reminds me why I don't rate books unless they're a flat-out 5-star or a new favorite, and instead focus on what the book can teach me, what I can get from the pages, because this is a reading experience where the story isn't going to stick out for me for a long time, but the themes undoubtedly will. Look at all of those tabs. I pocketed so much knowledge from these pages. It was one of those stories that feature nuggets of wisdom from elderly characters, which I am an absolute sucker for, so a friendly reminder that there's so much more to subjective experience when it comes to reading. Up next, To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. You already know it. Becky Chambers is the author that wrote my favorite books of all time, The Monk and the Robot duology. So here I am making it through her discography, baby! This is a futuristic sci-fi novella that follows a band of characters who are all coming to. They're waking up in the spaceship because they've been asleep for literal years, so they can go super deep into space and then report what they find and send the information from the cosmos back to Earth. And that's what we get as readers, is their findings and their reports. I buddy read this one with Katie, and I think she put it perfectly in her June wrap-up. Reading this one with a friend definitely enhanced my reading experience as a whole and just made it so much more memorable, which of course is true for any book. Buddy reading is a magical thing to do. But I think it benefited this one especially, seeing as it is on the shorter side. So to be able to slow down and go over the themes and the many questions that Becky Chambers was asking us, it was just so nice not to tackle it alone. I think if you're not a big sci-fi girly like me, but you're trying to dip your toes in the genre, this is a lovely place to start. It's a book that respects your time, it's not too complicated, plus it's excessively philosophical, so wins all around. Next, The 5 People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom. Within this one, we follow a man who was killed by a carnival ride, and then he wakes up in the afterlife, and as the title suggests, he meets 5 people who introduce him to heaven. What made this one so special to me was how it showed how such insignificant moments can act as serious domino effects in yours or other people's lives, how the little things can make such a huge difference. I also loved being reminded that love exists after life and that sacrifice isn't an inherently negative thing. Rather, it's something to strive for, to add meaning to your days. I really did quite like this one. It was pretty readable. It was really cheesy, but I do love me some cheese. But even for me, the ending was a little rich. I just had a great time overall. I love the lessons that each person provided to our protagonist. This is just my kind of story. Up next, we have Homie by Danae Smith, which is a poetry collection that was gifted to me by Grey Wolf Press earlier this year, and I'm very excited that they turned me onto this one. I know that I've been trying to get into poetry for like 6 months or something now, but I still feel so new to the genre, and I have no idea how to summarize them or share them with you. So I think what I'm gonna do is just read you a segment from one of my favorite poems to kind of give you a taste of what you can have if you also read this book. This is difficult to do holding a microphone. ASMR. Okay, one of my favorite poems was called Waiting on You to Die So I Can Be Myself. The opening line is, 1,000 years of daughters than me. What else could I have learned to be? And it ends with, I want to say something without saying it, but there's no time. I'm waiting for a few folks I love dearly to die so I can be myself. Please don't make me say who. The garments I'd buy if my baby wasn't alive. If they woke up at their wake, they might not recognize that woman in the front, making all that noise. This is very good. I liked it a lot. I also really liked the poem, I think it was called Rosie, which is about how mean children can be and how the author was no exception. I love when artists admit their mistakes, because mistakes are human and we need to make them so we can learn. This one just got me thinking. I liked it a lot, so read it if you'd like. Up next, I read Motherhood by Shayla Hetty. This is a stream of consciousness novel about a woman who is deeply questioning whether or not to be a mother herself, but specifically whether she should spawn her own offspring using her own body. There was so much I loved about this book. So many tabs, so many underlines. It got me thinking. But much like the other Shayla Hetty I read, the strong moments are so strong that they falcon punch me in the throat and I'm out of breath and I need to recover. but then the flop moments are so flopulous that I'm ready to put the book down. The biggest flaw in this one, I think, is how repetitive it was. Like, I think this is another book that could have benefited from being a novella. However, it was still so strong. Like, it got me questioning everything. I was sending passages to my sister and my friends because Hetty just has such a way with words. They pierce your brain and you can't get them out. Within this one, there's mysticism, there's philosophical ponderings, there's reasonable whining and self-pity and anger and excitement and fear. I wish I read this one with my Sunday book club with my friends from back home so badly, because it holds the power to spark some serious, poignant discussions and emotional dissection, especially between folks who are able to get pregnant. That being said, I do wish that this offered a wider perspective on motherhood, seeing as that's the title of the book, the theme for the book. To my knowledge, only one character mentioned a non-heterosexual parenting structure briefly in passing, and I feel like motherhood or starting a family is such a colorful spectrum of possibilities. It's beautiful, and to have an entire 300 or so page book only exploring one avenue to really do that, I felt like it was a disservice. So while this was still so good to me, I wish we had replaced some of the repetition with exploring the possibilities a bit more, because there are endless avenues to this topic. Up next, we have The Beekeeper of Aleppo by Kirsty Lefteri. This is a story about a husband and a wife who are seeking refuge in England after having to flee their home country of Syria. We bounce between the many hoops and waiting games that they have to play once reaching the UK, and also the many sacrifices and challenges they face in order to get to the UK. I thought that this did such a gorgeous job at showing the many ways that trauma can manifest in someone, both mentally and physically. I love stories that remind its readers how crucial it is to nurture your connections with others in order to manufacture hope, and this did that. The characters were succinct, the story was strong, the food descriptions were divine. I just felt like the pacing left a little bit to be desired. I think that this could have benefited from being edited down by like 100 pages, but honestly, the pacing is the only complaint that I have for this story. This is a book that is written in a way where you are immediately hooked and care about everything that unfolds within the first paragraph. That's difficult to do. It's such a good read. This is probably going to be a modern classic. That's my prediction. Okay, I would like to calmly announce that we have officially reached the mark of the video in which I feature my favorite books from last month. We've got 5 that were so top tier that I just felt the need to say this before introducing any of them. Okay? The first one was Genderqueer by Maya Kovave. This is a graphic memoir, which, if you're not new here, you know graphic memoirs are one of my favorite genres. They are such an excellent way to experience somebody's story. First of all, N.D. Stevenson, the creator of Nimona, wrote the intro to this. Stunning. Secondly, this book did such a stellar job at holding a mirror up to the arbitrary gendered expectations that we hold for one another. I found Kobabe's story and the way that it was told to be the perfect balance of complex yet so simple, all while sitting on a foundation of so relatable, at least to me. This is such a valuable resource if you yourself are trying to detangle any complicated feelings that you may have surrounding your own gender identity, but it would also make for such an accommodating tool to a friend, family member, or even a therapist to help them understand you or others just a little bit better. I haven't always been educated on these topics, and I think we should remember that no human being walked out of the womb with all of the knowledge from the world, especially a world that is never not evolving. So it's crucial to remember there's always more to learn, but most importantly, that it's never too late to learn. And in my opinion, this is such a beautiful place to start. Next, Dogs of Summer by Andrea Abreu, translated by Julia Sanchez. I'm sure y'all are sick of hearing it by now, but this year I'm really diving into my grossness of girlhood era of sorts. So if you have any recommendations for more, please let me know. This complicated queer story follows 2 10-year-old best friends living in a village on an island in Spain near a volcano. So it really features that sticky, slow, small town summer energy. It's chock full of lush descriptions and solid themes. Some of my favorites include being closeted but not even knowing what that is or having the words to understand or explain that experience, varying class structures that both coexist and clash between those who live on the island and those who visit the island, and how normalized eating disorder behaviors were in the early 2000s. I loved reading about this friendship and all of the flaws it contained. I loved how human this book felt to me. I loved the run-on sentences. I loved how nostalgic it made me for being 10 years old, and also how grateful it made me feel to no longer be 10 years old. It did such an excellent job at representing the confusing emotions that sprout at this age and the seemingly unconventional, but actually couldn't be any more normal, paths a kid may take to make sense of it all. This was our June read for the Pocket Pages Book Club, which is the book club for this channel. It's called the Pocket Pages because we discuss in a temporary Discord chat server, so you can tune in and chime in at your convenience. You don't have to be available for any live streams or anything like that. Time zones cannot stop us. Everyone is welcome. Join us if you'd like. We have so much fun, but this one was top tier in my opinion. I can't wait to read more from this author, and thank you so much for sharing all of your thoughts and feelings with me. Thank you for reading with me. Up next, we have a very short memoir / self-help book, and it is called What I Mean When I Say I'm Autistic: Unpuzzling a Life on the Autism Spectrum by Annie Katowitz. Now, I read a handful of autistic-fronted fictions and non-fictions, and I've heard your pleas. I know you'd love a video containing my recommendations, and that will be in the making. I just want to read a few more books. If you would like to send in any recommendations for said video, or for my TBR, or for my reading pleasure, I am always looking for more books that feature autism, so please comment down below. Thank you so much. But for now, just now, this one is a good one. This is one I would recommend. I learned a lot while reading this one despite having read several other books on this topic. What makes this one so good and what also made me pretty jealous is that Annie seems to be so self-aware and in tune with what her needs are, her accommodations, what this all means for her, which is the exact opposite about how I feel about my autism diagnosis. Which I get it, it's fine, it's a learning process. I've only known for like a year, and that's exactly why I picked up this book and why I continue to read books from fellow autistic folks, because I need a lot of help putting words to experiences that I don't have the words for. And this is exactly what that book did for me. There's almost a tab or an underline on every single page. Look at this, it's ridiculous. While reading this one, I could genuinely feel myself becoming better, learning more, growing, understanding, which is an invaluable gift. I really just couldn't recommend this one more. The next two I kind of count as one book, and they are Garlic and the Vampire and Garlic and the Witch by Brie Paulson. I buddy read these with Allie over at the Hardback Hoarder, and these two stories follow an overtly anxious personified garlic bulb who was summoned by her fellow vegetable folk to go into the forest and face the vampire that seemed to have inhabited an abandoned castle near their home. The second one follows Garlic going on an adventure to a magical market to get a magical ingredient. These books, in my opinion, are next level, y'all. What I mean by that is that yes, they're cute, they're cozy, they're woodsy, they're cottagey, they're slow, but they also explore themes and lessons and emotions. Just because a book is basically plotless, in my opinion, it doesn't mean that we can't think about stuff. I love thinking about stuff. In fact, I can't stop thinking about stuff. I read these two books while sitting in a hospital waiting room last month, and they completely transported me from my sad little plastic chair, from my stressed out little self, to giggling in this magical world. I loved the themes explored within both of these, especially the second one. I adored these books. If you consider yourself a cozy fantasy girly, you are doing yourself a disservice by sleeping on both of these. And last but not least, we have Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austen. This is another book that I read for the Great Gay Reading Vlog, and funnily enough, as I was reading this book, Sean McComb recommended it to me in one of his more recent videos, so the universe is universing. This is a story that I went into knowing almost nothing. I knew that our protagonist was anxious, specifically surrounding death. What I didn't know is that she's a hypochondriac atheist lesbian working under wraps as a secretary in a Catholic church. But even then, what is this story about? Everything and nothing all at the same time. We're mostly just sitting in the head of this narrator and marinating in her thoughts, which were horrendously relatable to me. Most importantly, this was a funny book. Like, blowing air out of my nose several times funny book. Funny books are few and far between. So again, if you know of any, please let me know. Please. But it was also so creatively written, and the way that it was structured made it so chronically readable. I devoured this one in one day without even trying. This was so impressive to me, and I just found out that Austen has a new book coming out in January, and since so many of y'all love this one, I thought I'd put you onto it. It's called Interesting Facts About Space, which is about, and I quote, a space and true crime obsessed woman who has an irrational fear of bald men and is convinced someone is following her. Also, she has another book that came out like 4 years before this one, which I've never heard about, but it sounds so good. It's called Oh Honey, and it's about this woman who is a telemarketer, and she uses a fake name with each call that she makes. However, each call that she makes goes to the same man. I hear that it's the darker cousin of this one, so I gotta read both as soon as I possibly can. And there you have it. Those were the 16 books that I was lucky enough to read in the month of June. Despite the health scares and complications, I really did have such a great kickstart to my summer reading, and for that I'm grateful. I hope you can say the same about yourself. In fact, please let me know what your favorite books from June were. My TBR is never not expanding thanks to you enabling scoundrels, so keep spending my money for me in the comments down below. There's also some seriously fun summer reading plans still to come. SUMMERWEEN is happening right now. I will link all the details for that down below. Also in August, it's Women in Translation Month, which I think I'm gonna host a readathon on my Patreon for that because I had so much fun with it last year. Speaking of Patreon, thank you so much to everyone who is on there. You make it possible for me to do what I do. You keep this cozy corner of the internet alive. If you would like to join the cause and redeem some sick perks for yourself, we have a super supportive Discord, funky fresh downloadables, printable bookmarks, and so much more. Join us if you have the means, if you can, if you'd like. Also, if you'd like, don't forget you can get your first hardcover fiction through Book of the Month for just $9.99 using the code AllisonPages. Thank you so much, Book of the Month, for sponsoring today's video. Thank you for tuning into my silly little videos. You know how it is. As always, thank you for clicking, thank you for caring, and thank you for being nice. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!